everyone, welcome to another edition of Sector 5. I'm your host, as always, Cody the Hangman Heinzman. And it's been a few hours. Money in the Bank has ended. I'm here to give the rundown and slight thoughts on the pay-per-view. So, let's get started. Two matches that was not talked about in my predictions because I knew nothing about them until today. We had Jeff Hardy versus Cesaro, where Hardy picked up a victory against Cesaro. He's on this one last run kick, so it's going to be interesting to see what progresses there. And then we had R-Truth, who was set to face off against MVP, had a little joke segment, and Bobby Lashley came out, and R-Truth faced Bobby Lashley instead. And he picked up the win. Bobby Lashley is who I mean by he. So that's all of the matches that were not talked about in the predictions. So let's go on and talk about the matches that were actually on the predictions. First one I had talked about was actually the first match of the night. The New Day versus Miz and John Morrison versus the Forgotten Sons versus the Lucha House Party for the Smackdown Tag Team Championship. And before I continue about this, to back up a little bit to the matches before this, Hardy versus Cesaro actually happened during the kickoff. And R-Truth and Bobby Lashley happened during the actual pay-per-view. But, enough about those. SmackDown Tag Team Championship, Fatal 4-Way match, New Day, Miz, and Morrison versus Forgotten Sons versus Lucha House Party, just to reiterate again. And the winner of that match, surprisingly, was the New Day. I'm actually kind of surprised that they retained. Like I've said lately, it seems like tag team division is a lot of, you get to hold the titles for a week, okay, now this person has the titles. Now you have the titles. It's a lot of flip-flopping with those. So it kind of surprises me that New Day actually retained. Next up, we have Bayley versus Tamina for the SmackDown Women's Championship, and the winner of that match, and still SmackDown Women's Champion, was Bayley. Unsurprisingly, with some help from Sasha Banks. And we'll talk just a little bit more about this after we talk about the Money in the Bank. Next up, match I talked about was Strowman versus Bray Wyatt for the Universal Championship. Sorry, I keep thinking that's part of the Raw brand still. I haven't gotten used to it being on SmackDown. Strowman versus Bray Wyatt for the Universal Championship. And the winner of that match, and still Universal Champion, was Braun Strowman. And they very much hinted at Strowman versus The Fiend at probably the next pay-per-view. Or at some point. Again, like Bray Wyatt stated in their little promo exchange, this is just the beginning. So, Strowman versus Bray Wyatt is just the beginning of this rivalry. Next time, instead of Strowman versus Bray Wyatt, it's going to be Strowman versus The Fiend. Same person, different persona type of situation. Next up, I have Drew McIntyre versus Seth Rollins for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, and Drew McIntyre did retain. And at the end of the match, McIntyre shook Seth Rollins' hands. It's a little bit interesting what they're planning there. And when McIntyre was on the stage, he hinted on, I'll see you again later down the road. So it very much seems like we're going to have a rematch between Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins maybe sometime down the road. Even if it's maybe not just those two. Maybe it'll be a triple threat or a fatal four-way type situation. Last but not least, we had the Money in the Bank match. Daniel Bryan, Shayna Baszler, Aleister Black, Nia Jax, Rey Mysterio, Asuka, King Corbin, Dana Brooke, Otis, Lacey Evans, AJ Styles, and Carmella. And as I stated in the predictions, in case you might be wondering why I'm doing this and didn't particularly watch Money in the Bank or know what's going on, the match happened at the same time. The women's Money in the Bank ladder match happened at the same time as the men's. You had the women starting at like the ground floor of the WWE headquarters, and then maybe like a floor above or something in like the gym area. You had the men starting off. They all came out, made entrances as if it was an actual match, and they kind of lined up as if it was going to be like a race to the finish. Like, we're going to ring the bell and we're just going to run to the roof where the briefcases are. During the match, Dana Brooke seen like a phony Money in the Bank hanging and pulled it down, and it looked as if she won it. And then they had like a small skit where Stephanie's like, you do realize that the real title is actually on the roof. That was a interesting segment to put in there, but it just kind of made Dana Brooke kind of look dumb, because it was stated at the beginning of this, hey, the title's on the roof. So what made you think that that was the actual title? But that's neither here nor there. The match itself was an interesting concept. I kind of question why they decided to do it this way. Why did they have to make them go from like the ground floor of it and move up the thing? Why didn't they just have the Money in the Bank briefcase match? I think one of the things I can think of is maybe the Performance Center isn't equipped for that type of match. But I think they've had ladder matches on NXT before, so it might not be the case. The other thing was, which kind of reverts back to what I was saying earlier about the whole Smackdown women's thing. I made reference to if, like, Shayna Baszler picked up the win, she would cash in that same night, depending on when the Money in the Bank briefcase match happened. I guess I didn't read enough into the match to realize that the Money in the Bank match was actually happening in a different area than the rest of the other matches. The Money in the Bank match happened at the headquarters, where the rest of Money in the Bank happened at the Performance Center. So, had I read enough into it and realized that that was the case, I wouldn't have put that into my prediction. So, I guess that's a little bit on me. But the only thing I really knew about the match was it was the men and the women were going on at the same time, and that we're starting at the ground floor and going up to the roof. But enough of, I guess, my ramblings on that. Let's actually talk about the winners of said match. The first person to get their Money in the Bank briefcase was on the Divas side. And yes, I still say Divas every now and again. I'll go in between Divas and Women's every now and again, but that's neither here nor there. Asuka won the Women's Money in the Bank briefcase. And then we had the men's, and it had a very interesting end, and a very surprising person win said title. I'm trying to think here. I believe it was Daniel Bryan. No, not Daniel Bryan. It was AJ Styles and King Corbin who climbed the ladder. They pulled the briefcase down and were kind of having a back and forth tug of war, trying to win it. I believe Styles knocked Corbin off, but lost control of the briefcase, sent it flying down into the hands of Otis, who was declared the winner. So the winner of the 2020 Money in the Bank men's match was Otis. And I was kind of skeptical about this. I got a young boy at work who was talking to me about it, and he said, I think Otis is going to win it. And I'm like, I could slightly see it. But I was really gung-ho on Styles picking up the win. And while we're talking about AJ Styles a little bit, there was a really nice callback to his Boneyard match during the Money in the Bank briefcase match, where AJ's walking down the hall. He was looking for Rey Mysterio because he wanted to go after Rey Mysterio because he wouldn't help him pick up the weights that were laid on top of him by Otis towards the beginning of the match. And he walks by this picture that was The Undertaker. And then they had a room set up with a casket and had like the infamous Undertaker blue lights. So it was interesting to see that. And I kind of was expecting to see The Undertaker maybe make an appearance, but I guess I can understand why he didn't. We did have some interesting cameos by former superstars and by Mr. McMahon. So there was that. All in all, I enjoyed the Money in the Bank regardless of the circumstances. I guess I still don't get why we didn't have the Money in the Bank the way it was originally scheduled. But we got what we got. And Asuka and Otis are your winners of the Money in the Bank briefcases. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Going back to the young boy that works with me that I was talking about the match with, after he brought up the interesting idea of Otis winning it, I said that there's probably... I see him losing the briefcase. Like, he's going to face Dolph Ziggler in a match and have to put the briefcase up for grabs. And I kind of see Dolph Ziggler possibly taking the briefcase from him. So, Otis is currently Mr. Money in the Bank. Whether or not it stays that way, we'll just have to see. Because I really can't see him winning the Universal or WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Or he'll be a case of doesn't cash it in. He just holds on to it and never cashes it in. There's that too. There's going to be some kind of a storyline. End of the day, if he does cash it in, then I see him not winning at the same time. The only person I could actually see him, because of his current storyline that he's going down, is if somehow Ziggler gets Universal WWE World Heavyweight Championship at some point. So we're just gonna have to see what happens. I have also thrown out, like was talking about, maybe Otis will go after NXT. Maybe he'll get. I'm sorry, I just kind of had a thought. I wonder. It's kind of a dumb thought, a little bit. I wonder if he'd be able to cash in on tag team champions. Be like, have him and Tucker pick up a tag team title because he cashes in on Money in the Bank. I kind of don't see that, but it's an interesting thought. But I've been rambling and pausing a lot, so I think I'm going to end it here. I hope y'all enjoyed Money in the Bank, and hopefully the next pay-per-view goes back to somewhat normalcy. Everything seems to be going back to this normal. So here soon we'll probably have normal WWE programming. And one more thing that I would like to add before I end off, to continue my thoughts with having the WWE World Heavyweight Championship in this pay-per-view. I made mention in my predictions that they probably should have held off on adding that to the card, because if you look at it, you have the SmackDown Tag Team Championship, the SmackDown Women's, and the SmackDown Universal Championship. They should have probably just added an Intercontinental Championship match and had this as like a SmackDown pay-per-view. And then Backlash could have been Raw. So, just a thought. And then the pay-per-view after that could have gone back to Raw and SmackDown matches. But it's neither here nor there. The WWE World Heavyweight Championship was a hard-fought match. It was a really good match. But I still kind of wish that it was maybe an Intercontinental Championship match and this was like a SmackDown pay-per-view. But that's my thoughts. I hope y'all still enjoyed Money in the Bank. Again, hopefully the next pay-per-view goes back to a normal. Not that these pay-per-views have been bad. It's just an interesting time for it to have come around. Money in the Bank worked under this. WrestleMania, unfortunately, had to take its bump with this. So, just makes more excitement for next year. We'll look forward to a better WrestleMania. And I've even heard them say that they might continue the 2-day tradition from here on out with WrestleMania, which I think is good. Because of everything they have, why not make it a 2-night thing so you can showcase everything and not have to tire out your talent and tire out your audience. But that's my final thoughts. I hope y'all enjoyed Money in the Bank. Look forward to Backlash. And as always, I'm Cody the Hangman Heinzman, and that's just how it is.